People who change their voice around certain people are often labeled as fake, insecure, or trying too hard. But let's be honest, right from the start, that explanation is lazy. And deep down, you know it's not true. Because your voice doesn't change to impress, it changes to survive. You don't consciously decide to raise your pitch, soften your volume, slow your words, or tighten your throat because you are calculating an image. You do it because your nervous system has already made a split-second decision. This environment is not emotionally neutral. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your voice is not just a personality trait. It is a biological signal. Before you think, before you choose, before you even notice what's happening in the room, your body scans the territory. It reads power dynamics. It senses emotional safety. It calculates the risk of judgment. It anticipates the risk of rejection. It smells the possibility of conflict. And then, your voice adjusts accordingly. You think you're just being polite, but your body remembers moments when speaking freely had consequences. So you lower your voice to not provoke. You soften your tone to stay likable and non-threatening. You speed up to avoid taking up too much space or time. You slow down to sound controlled and competent. You laugh lightly to diffuse tension before it even appears. This is not manipulation. This is memory. It is emotional memory stored in the throat, jaw, chest, and diaphragm. The twist is this: you don't consciously decide who gets your real voice. Your nervous system decides who feels safe enough to hear it. And that is why the change feels automatic, effortless, invisible. You don't even notice it happening till you leave the interaction feeling strangely tired, disconnected, or smaller than you were before. That exhaustion isn't socializing, it's regulation. It is your body working overtime to stay within its window of tolerance. And if this already resonates, if you've ever noticed yourself sounding different depending on who is standing in front of you, subscribe. Here we don't pathologize behavior, we expose the logic underneath it. Because by the end of this video, you won't just understand why your voice changes. You'll recognize which version of you learned to speak only when it was safe. And that awareness alone starts changing everything. Let's get surgical about this. Your voice doesn't originate in your personality. It originates in your nervous system. Physiologically, your vocal cords are directly connected to the vagus nerves, the highway of your emotional safety system. Before words form, your body asks a quieter, darker question. Is it safe to be fully here? If the answer is uncertain, your physiology intervenes before your psychology does. The throat tightens. Breath becomes shallow and moves to the upper chest. The jaw locks just enough to keep emotion contained. Your tone shifts not to deceive, but to regulate the room. This is what most people never realize. Changing your voice is not a social skill. It is a regulation strategy. Your system learned, often early in life, that unedited expression had consequences. Maybe speaking confidently invited criticism from a fragile parent. Maybe being loud meant being dismissed or shamed. Maybe sounding unsure got you ignored. Maybe sounding emotional made someone withdraw love, so your body adapted. Not with thoughts, with muscle memory. That's why you can be relaxed with one person and subtly guarded with another, even if both are perfectly nice people. Your system isn't reacting to who they are right now. It's reacting to what they represent emotionally. Authority, disappointment, unpredictability, conditional approval. Your voice adjusts to stay within your window of tolerance, the narrow zone where connection feels possible without threat. And here's the paradox. You think you're choosing the appropriate version of yourself, but what you're actually doing is avoiding dysregulation. You're preventing your heart rate from spiking. You are preventing your chest from tightening. You are preventing the old sensation of being too much or not enough. So you modulate. You become calmer than you feel, smaller than you are, kinder than you want to be, clearer than you're allowed to be. This is why some conversations leave you oddly drained, even when nothing bad happened. Because regulation costs energy. It is metabolic work. And when you've spent years fine-tuning your voice to fit the emotional climate of others, your system never truly rests. You don't feel unsafe enough to leave, but you never feel safe enough to arrive. And the most disorienting part? You start forgetting what your unregulated voice even sounds like. Not the loud one, not the polished one. The honest one? The one that doesn't scan first, the one that doesn't ask permission to exist. If this is landing somewhere familiar, stay with me, because next, we're going to break down the specific emotional archetypes behind this pattern, the different versions of you that learned how to speak to stay connected. And somewhere in those patterns, you'll recognize yourself. If you already know which one you might be, comment it below. Naming it is the first moment your body stops pretending it doesn't exist. Not everyone changes their voice for the same reason. The behavior looks similar from the outside, But the psychology underneath is radically different. Let's name the patterns your nervous system learned to inhabit. Because once you see yours, you stop thinking something is wrong with you. There is the softener. This is the version of you that lowers volume, adds warmth, raises the pitch, and smooths every edge. You sound agreeable, safe, easy. But softness here isn't gentleness, it is prevention. Somewhere early, your system learned that intensity threatened connection. That directness felt dangerous. That emotion made others uncomfortable. So you learned to dilute yourself before anyone else could. You speak carefully. You smile while explaining discomfort. You cushion the truth so it won't land too hard. The cost: resentment with a quiet voice, needs that never fully arrive, and relationships where you're liked but not fully known. Then there is the performer. Your voice becomes clearer, firmer, deeper, and more confident around certain people. Not because you feel secure, but because insecurity is not allowed. This pattern often forms in environments where competence earned safety, where being impressive meant being protected, where vulnerability had no audience. So your tone sharpens. Your words become efficient. Emotion gets edited out. You don't feel powerful, you sound powerful. The nervous system here isn't relaxed, it is armored. And the exhaustion comes from sustaining an identity your body never gets to step out of. There's the camouflager. Your voice mirrors whoever you're with. You adapt fast, too fast. Accent shifts. Energy matches. Vocabulary changes. This isn't just social intelligence, it is hypervigilance. Your system learned that belonging required attunement at the cost of authenticity. That being yourself risked exclusion. So you became emotionally bilingual, trilingual, multilingual. You're rarely rejected, but you're also rarely chosen for who you actually are. And over time, your internal question becomes quieter and darker. Do they like me? Or the version I presented? And then there's the minimizer, the voice that gets smaller around authority, conflict, or emotional intensity. Short sentences, less volume, more pauses. This pattern forms when speaking up once led to punishment, shame, or immediate withdrawal of affection. When visibility wasn't safe, so your nervous system decided, disappear slightly. It's safer. You're not passive. You're strategic. But living this way teaches the body a devastating lesson that your presence is negotiable. Here's what matters most. None of these archetypes are flaws. They are adaptations. They formed because at some point, they worked. They kept you connected. They kept you included. They kept you from losing something important. But what protected you then may be constricting you now, because the voice that survives is not the same voice that connects. And if you've ever left a conversation thinking, why didn't I say it the way I felt it? Your body already knows this. In the next section, we'll talk about the hidden cost of living in adaptation mode and why changing your voice slowly changes your sense of self. If one of these patterns hit home, comment it. Naming the strategy loosens its grip. Here's the part most people never connect. Changing your voice doesn't just shape conversations. It shapes who you think you are allowed to be. At first, adaptation feels harmless. You're just being flexible, emotionally intelligent, reading the room. But over time, something subtle happens. Your nervous system starts associating authentic expression with risk and self-modification with safety. And that's when adaptation stops being a tool and becomes an identity. You don't ask, what do I want to say? You ask, what version of me works here? That question alone fragments the self. Because every time you soften, sharpen, minimize, or perform your voice, your body learns a rule. My natural state is negotiable. And the cost of that rule is not immediate. It is cumulative. You start feeling oddly disconnected during conversations, in intimate ones. You're present, but not fully inside yourself. Engaged, but slightly observing from the outside. That's not disinterest. That's dissociation on a spectrum. Low grade, socially functional, deeply exhausting. This is why some people feel loneliest in relationships where they are doing everything right. Because connection without congruence doesn't regulate the nervous system. It drains it. Your body knows when your voice doesn't match your internal state. It experiences that mismatch as tension, jaw pain, throat tightness, shallow breathing, mental fatigue after normal interactions. And eventually, a deeper question appears, usually late at night, usually uninvited. Do people actually know me? Not the competent you. Not the kind you. Not the easy you. The unguarded you. Here's the paradox most don't want to face. The strategies that kept you safe emotionally also prevented others from fully reaching you. Not because they didn't want to, but because your system never stopped managing the distance. You didn't hide on purpose. You adapted automatically. And no one ever taught your body that safety could exist without performance, That's why stopping this pattern isn't about speaking louder or being confident. Those are surface fixes. The real shift happens when your nervous system learns a new association. That presence doesn't require protection. That expression doesn't equal loss. That your voice can exist without consequence. And that learning doesn't happen in the mind first. It happens in the body. In the next section, we'll talk about the turning point, the moment your system starts realizing it no longer has to survive the room. If this stirred something uncomfortable but familiar, you're exactly where you need to be. There's a moment, subtle, quiet, almost easy to miss, when this pattern begins to loosen. Not because you forced yourself to be more authentic, not because you decided to stop caring, but because your body finally receives new information. That information is simple but radical. Nothing bad happened when I stayed present. No punishment, no withdrawal, no rupture, and your nervous system takes note. This is how real change starts, not with courage, with evidence. Most people try to override their voice patterns cognitively. They tell themselves to speak up, relax, be confident, stop overthinking. But the body doesn't respond to instructions. It responds to experience. So the turning point is not dramatic. It's incremental. You notice your breath stays deeper in one conversation. Your throat doesn't tighten as fast. Your tone doesn't rush to adjust. You say one sentence without cushioning it. You don't over-explain. You don't scan for fallout. And when nothing collapses afterward, something inside you recalibrates. Your window of tolerance expands. This is crucial to understand. Your voice changes when your body senses safety, not when your mind decides to be brave. That's why the most powerful moments aren't loud. They're regulated. Calm without suppression, clarity without armor, presence without performance. And here's the part few people expect. As your voice stabilizes, some relationships feel strange because they were built around your adaptation. When you stop softening, some people might feel the edge. When you stop performing, some might feel less impressed, but more connected. When you stop minimizing, some might feel exposed. This isn't punishment, it's recalibration. Your system is no longer organizing itself around emotional survival. It is organizing around self-contact. And not everyone benefits from that shift. But the ones who do, they finally meet you. Not the version that learned to speak carefully, but the one who speaks from inside the body, not around it. This is why the goal was never to find your real voice. You never lost it. You just learned when it was safer not to use it. And now, slowly, your body is learning that safety doesn't always require silence. In the final section, we'll close this loop, not with motivation, but with truth. Because this pattern doesn't mean you're broken. It means you adapted brilliantly. So let's land this honestly. You didn't change your voice because you lack confidence. You didn't do it to manipulate. You didn't do it because you don't know who you are. You did it because, at some point, being fully audible came with a cost. And your nervous system is built for one primary job: connection without threat. So it learned the rules of the room faster than you could name them. It learned when to soften, when to sharpen, when to disappear just enough. That wasn't weakness. That was intelligence. The problem was never the adaptation. The problem was staying adapted long after the danger passed. Because here's the quiet truth most people miss. You don't heal by forcing yourself to speak louder. You heal when your body no longer expects punishment for existing. Your voice stabilizes when your system feels held internally or externally. When your breath doesn't brace. When your throat doesn't prepare for defense. When you're not scanning for emotional consequences mid-sentence. That's when your voice stops negotiating. Not because you tried to be authentic, but because authenticity stopped feeling risky. So if you're listening to this, and something inside you feels seen, not fixed, that's the point. You were never too much. You were cautious. You were never inconsistent. You were responsive. You were never hard to know. You just learned to protect what was tender. The real question isn't, why do I change my voice around certain people? It's this, who would you be if your body no longer had to brace for connection? If this helped you see your own psychological logic with less shame, share it with someone who lives in adaptation mode. And subscribe. This isn't a channel about self-improvement. It's about self-understanding without anesthesia.